My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said electric vehicles won't tow your trailer, won't tow your boat and will end the weekend. But now he says he didn't ridicule the technology. Does he think Australians don't notice when he says something on television and later pretends it never happened? Why does this Prime Minister keep making things up?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want Australians to have choice. I want Australians to have a choice about what sort of car they want to drive, Mr Speaker. I want them to have a choice about whether they use gas or electricity, Mr Speaker. I want them to have a choice about whether they want to work in a heavy industry in a regional area or have that job taken away from them, Mr Speaker, which is what would happen under the policies of the Labor and the Greens, Mr Speaker. That's what would happen to those jobs. I want Australians to have those choices. I want Australians to be able to plan for their future with confidence, Mr Speaker. And I want the big companies that make these electric vehicles to get their prices down without the Australian people have to pump subsidies into them, Mr Speaker. So if they wish to buy them, they can do so. But if the Labor Party wants to send money over to Europe, Mr Speaker, to big manufacturing companies to subsidise, Mr Speaker, now those offers are saying where and when. So this is the problem with the Labor Party. We don't know what their policies are. We don't always know what their policies are, Mr Speaker.
The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. On relevance, this went to the Prime Minister saying that he didn't ridicule the technology on electric vehicles. It didn't go to some fantasy policy that he's just making up. We want things to be made here. It's your mob that sent the car industry offshore.
Leader of the Opposition, in raising a point of order is not an opportunity to raise another argument. The Prime Minister has the call, and I'd ask the Prime Minister to remain relevant to the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I'm speaking about electric vehicles, Mr Speaker. Yesterday, the Leader of the Opposition didn't know what one was. He didn't know a hydrogen-powered electric vehicle was an electric vehicle, and he was the Minister for Transport for 6 years, Mr Speaker. That was actually his job, and he didn't know what it was, Mr Speaker. Heaven knows what he'd do on national security and the economy. The guy's never put a budget together. He spent 6 weeks sitting in the National Security Minister.
The Prime Minister.
I apologise, Mr Speaker. I'll return to the topic. And our policy when it comes to those vehicles, Mr Speaker, is we want to ensure that those technology costs come down so they can be affordable to Australians who wish to buy them. We don't want, Mr Speaker, to pay out subsidies to large companies overseas to make them cheaper, Mr Speaker. If people want to buy them, then we want the car companies to make sure they're more affordable and they bring down the costs on their technology because there is a large market for it. But what we won't do, I can tell you this, what we won't do, Mr Speaker, is put up the price of the cars they're now buying and that they wish to buy, Mr Speaker, to try and force their choice to another choice, Mr Speaker. It's the Labor Party who loves to tell you what to do. They love to make your choices for you.
Has the Prime Minister finished his question? Well, the Prime Minister wasn't asked for. The Manager of Opposition Business can return to his seat. The Prime Minister wasn't asked in relation to alternative policies. The Prime Minister has the call.
I was not asked about alternative policies, Mr Speaker, because I couldn't actually speak of the alternative policies. I wasn't asked about alternative policies, Mr Speaker. All I can go in terms of alternative policies from the opposition is what they did at the last election, Mr Speaker, because that's the only thing we know. And there's only one thing worse than Labor telling you what they're going to do is when they're so sneaky not to tell you.
Order.